and since the workforce and the economy has changes, what shall we be doing, etc. So Sekhan will be covering that. While we get into the topic itself, Sekhan, this morning, wasn't this morning, actually this week I read about a case. So a mathematics applications company called Mathway had a breach and 20 data is stolen. And I think a couple of days later, it is in the dark web for sale. And it's only for about the value of 4,000 US dollars or pound, I can't remember it is for now, in Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency method. So, this is nothing new, data breach, etc. You get, ransomware whatsoever and that's the thing. But there is a statement, okay, said by one of the chief security strategists in a quite renowned company. It says that credential can be stolen, password can be cracked, but identity and access management program driven by the best practices can be prevented by most skilled hacker group from stealing sensitive data by ensuring proactive control in place. Now, this particular company, Mathway, could have been benefited from the AI platform that could raise the alert warnings based on anomaly in access pattern and privilege violation. Do you agree with, I'm sure you agree with this statement somehow, but what do you make of this statement?
Yeah, look, just with the breaches, actually with that statement, I do agree with it. I think it's very important because, and they touched on a couple of really good points there, right? Yes, there will always be some kind of a breach. And by the way, the only difference is you either have been breached or you just don't know about it yet, or it's coming. Like, you should never assume that you're 100% safe. But, with the breach, what they're talking about with the credential theft, they're right. People can crack passwords, they'll be able to steal the credentials. But with the correct identity processes, identity governance processes in place, you can really minimize the potential risk that will have to your organization and minimize the amount of data loss that will occur. Now, what do I mean by that? To bring it into, I guess, really simple, realistic type use cases that many organizations do today, and I'm sure people on the line will probably think, yeah, that's exactly what we do. And it's a common approach, right? Which is, consider this. You've got a new employee who joins in. One of the things that a lot of organizations do is, well, this new employee that's coming in our company, he's working as part of Serkan's team, and he's going to do the same thing that Serkan does. So let's just give whatever access Serkan has to this guy. But I've been with the company for about 10 years now, and over 10 years, I've had 3 different roles, and I've been part of multiple different projects, and I've got access to all this different data, which I do as part of my job, but the new person doesn't necessarily need to have. So you're cloning all this access, and all these people are accumulating additional access rights, right? So you're effectively giving everyone complete access to all your data by having the correct identity process in place. What you're doing now is actually controlling. It's like taking the least privilege approach, right? You're controlling how much access to data that the people have. So even if their credential was compromised, right? Even if it's leaked, however method this happened in, then they only have access to a smaller amount of data versus having access to everything. And then that's what that's about. It's about controlling them and just really minimizing that risk.
Okay. Because of the case I read, and the data they stolen, they only sold it for 4,000. I'm not sure which part is more insulting. Is that the data is so cheap, or then they have to spend more money, more than 4,000, I'm pretty sure, to get a system in place to make sure this doesn't happen again. Because like I say, I'm not so sure which one is actually more. Now, to add to that, yesterday we also, by the way, all the attendee today is from Singapore. So good morning again for those who just joined. Now, yesterday we do have a lot of questions. One of the questions didn't get answered, and I drilled down to this that because of a lot of people are now bouncing from disruption or this crisis, cost is the main thing they're going to look at. Restructuring and adapt to changes, etc. a lot of attendee yesterday was saying that Active Directory is also a IAM tool they can use, okay? And for them, it's sufficient. Why do they need to deploy a more robust IAM tool since that they already have Active Directory?
I've actually heard that statement a few times before as well from others, and I agree that in Active Directory is a very important system, and it's a very important component as part of your identity strategy, right? A lot of your applications, a lot of business applications are integrated to Active Directory, whether it's tightly integrated where you have authentication and authorization within AD, or it might just be the authentication component, right? So it's controlling a lot of that, and it's definitely an important system. But it's not the only part when you talk, it's not the only to think of when you're talking about identity management or identity and access management. And what I mean by that is when we talk about identity, Active Directory is one of the systems that you need to have control and governance processes over. So what identity systems offer over the top of something like AD, and it doesn't matter the size of the organization, by the way, you could be a smaller 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 employee type organization, or you could be a large multinational bank with 20, 30, 40, 50,000 employees, right? The challenge is still the same everywhere in that you need to be able to apply that control and that permissioning to make sure that within AD, the users who are only authorized to make those changes to AD are only making the changes to the things that they're authorized for and nothing else. It's about controlling that and making sure you've got that delegation, that flexibility around that to model it correctly. That's one piece. But then when you're talking about user and from the end user experience side, it's also about number of groups in AD which grant you access to applications or grant you access to file shares. They're only a member of the groups that they need to be a member of, right? And we have that complete visibility back to organization and contextual data. It's about tying all that up. So AD on its own is not your complete identity story, and it doesn't just end there. It's a very important piece, but the identity strategy actually does involve a few additional components that do wrap around that and that help secure that as well. And of course, expand it out to non-AD systems. Reality is for a lot of companies, AD is not the only authentication or user directory that exists for them. They may have other LDAP type directories. You may have databases and mainframes.
Okay, great. We are going to come back to more challenging thought and questions for Serkan. After this, Serkan is going to do a presentation. So we have, I think, a bit of technical issue for Ms. Lind. If you have echo issue, are you using your phone or actually using your computer? Are you using both? Because sometimes they can do that. And you might want to reload and then join back in again if see if it's possible. Okay. We do have poll today that we need everyone to complete. And also, I just also want to ask one question to the audience. That because of the topic itself, how many of your organization are going through changes, especially in the next few months or so, where everybody is back to work, etc. If you can just sort of like raise your hand, there's an icon there on that smiley face. You can just give me a smiley face if you want it, or a little handshake. If your organization is going through a number of changes, not just security, but all type of changes after this disruption. So like this, no one?
I'll put a smiley face. I know our organization has gone through changes as well, right?
Okay. Everybody a bit shy. I also need to get your reaction as well. It was, it's not like me and Serkan talking alone. Well, at least we got one reaction. At least one company. Oh, so Jackie's reaction change. Okay, can we give a warm welcome applause to Serkan? Is going to do this presentation, and after that, I will ask all the questions as well. Serkan, please go.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me just quickly set up my screen share. Jeffrey, if you could let me know if that's coming through.
Yeah, it's coming through. Go ahead.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Oops. That was my PC. Let's try that. That's so weird. Sorry guys, bear with me 1 second. Okay. All right, I think that should be all good now, so I'm good to go. Thanks again, everybody. Thanks for your time this morning. Thanks for joining our session. Just a quick introduction. I'm Serkan Seaton, part of One Identity, technical director for One Identity across APJ. Been with the company for about coming up close to 8 years now, and worn a few different hats in a few different roles in my 8 years here. So from whether it be from pre-sales to actual professional services. So I've played the role of architect. I've also played the role of consultant and developer. So I've also wrote code and stuff like that. And I still do whenever I do get a bit of time. So I still like to get my hands dirty, so to speak, and roll up the sleeves and do stuff like that. So yeah. But I've actually been doing identity management or been involved in identity management processes for a lot longer than that. I used to work for a consulting firm just based out of here in Australia and delivering identity projects for a wide range of different organizations, from government to banking to education to utilities, manufacturing, and so on. So yeah, good to speak to everyone again today. Today, some of the stuff that we're actually going to talk about is just some of the changes that we've all experienced over the last couple of months, and the changes that we'll probably still experience over the next few months as well, right? As everything around this pandemic and what's happening globally just keeps shifting and keeps moving, and the impact that has to our organizations. Every organization has been a little bit different in some of the experiences that they've had, and various levels of changes. Recently, some organizations unfortunately have had to have a large number of layoffs, a large number of employees that they've had to terminate as part of this, as their businesses have been completely disrupted. In some cases, got employees that are now on standby or have now been added or put onto like a unpaid leave type arrangement. For many companies, pretty much all companies that I'm aware of, we've transitioned to remote. So it's we've taken employees who are traditionally within our offices, within our premises, and we've now enabled them to now work from home and had to transition all that to now a remote-based workforce, right? And in some cases, there's actually been a couple of industries where they've had to go through and actually do a mass or a bulk hiring and a transfer and internal, the mover processes, as certain areas of the business or in different industries, for example, like in logistics, as part of your supply chains, they've experienced different kinds of challenges. Again, just with, if you think about what we're experiencing a few months ago with the panic buying, right? So that's had all kinds of different challenges to different industries, which has had to have all impact or different levels of changes. The thing with it all is that a lot of this wasn't actually planned for, right? None of this wasn't planned for, both from the business, but even from the IT perspective. And when you look at the changes that we're doing from an IT perspective, whether it be putting employees on standby or on unpaid leave, having to terminate some contracts, transitioning to remote, doing some additional hires, contingent workers, contract workers, or cross-department, inter-department transfers. A lot of this has actually got to do with the joiner, mover, and leaver processes within IT security management. So when we talk about identity management, for example. So it's all about that whole provisioning and deprovisioning type processes that's had the impact on the back on the IT side. Now, we did a survey a few months back, which was about 1,000 or over 1,000 professionals, identity professionals globally. And from that survey, we've got a couple of interesting results. One of them is that only 18% of the respondents to that survey, so only 18% of those practitioners, reported that it actually takes them minutes to provision a user. So if you look at it the other way, 82% now say that it takes longer. It takes hours, days, weeks, or longer to have a new employee fully provisioned in their organization. The other side of that is think about the leaver process. Now with leavers, in that, again, that survey was reported that about 28% actually can fully deprovision a user within minutes, right, from the time that I have to go. The other way is 72% are not actually able to deprovision within minutes, and it takes much longer again for them. Might be hours, days, weeks, right? So the actual leaver process and that delay there actually has a huge risk. The delays in the joiner process and that delay causes obviously impacts to performance and stuff like that, and delays there. But the actual deprovisioning delays is just causing a risk with accounts that remain unchecked, that remain still active within applications and systems. So then we asked about, okay, for the ones who were doing this, we then asked additional questions about how are they actually doing it, right? And what are they using to do it? And what we found that less than a third of those people who responded, well, it's actually less than a third who have the proper tools in place to execute timely. So 2/3 don't have the complete tools around that to actually be able to execute completely, for what they need to do here. And 37% of those responded that they have tools for managing AD, for being able to handle this with Active Directory. 33% of them responded that they can handle this for most of their on-premise applications, but only 30% say that they have capabilities for cloud provisioning. So that's, you got to, like we were talking a little bit about earlier, organizations, you guys do have different needs, different applications, different systems, both on-prem. AD is just as important, Active Directory as well, but then you also have different cloud applications and systems. The bottom line of all of this is really that a majority of the organizations out there are not fully equipped to be able to handle these type of changes in a timely manner and bring this down into the minutes to make this a lot easier for them. Now, if you think about it, the type of change that's been enforced on your organization, we've had, just think about remote workers, for example. I can tell you that within our organization, a majority of our employees, we had a large number of employees who were already were accustomed to working remotely, including myself. I've always been a remote employee. But then we've also had employees, we've got some of our team members who weren't remote employees. They were working within an office. So we've also had to transition them from now, transition our workforce effectively from being like 60, 70% remote to 100% remote. And that's for us. And I suppose we're fortunate in that way, in that a lot of our employees are used to being able to work remotely, work from their laptops, from wherever they are in the world. But a lot of cases, a lot of organizations don't have that same luxury. So a lot of organizations actually had their workforce that was located within their premises, within their buildings. So you've had to transition a lot of that. So you've had a significant growth in the number of remote workers that you've had. Or the number of remote workers you now need to enable. Then you've got things like, the high number of workers that you may have had to put on standby or on unpaid leave. So again, a bulk deprovisioning activity, or being able to actually identify those and then control which ones are going to be on leave and how you're going to handle their account and so on, right? And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, there are instances where employees have had to been let go or terminated contracts. Employees have had to been let go or terminated contracts as part of this. So there has been challenges, and one of the other areas is actually is around like new additional hires. Like I mentioned briefly earlier, in some industries and in some services or some functions within organizations, they've seen a spike or an increase in demand to be able to support their customers. And as a result of that, they've had to hire additional resources, or they've had to bring in additional contractors or resources to be able to actually help them with dealing with the load, with dealing with that demand, like thinking like logistics, for example, right? Or even transferring from different business areas. So transferring across different government agencies to support another agency with their volume, with the amount of volume that's coming through to support their citizens. So how do you guys do? That's, what was it a good experience? Was it a bad experience? What are some of the things that you can take away from lessons learned out of this? The bottom line for a lot of us is that we did the best we could with the hand that we've been dealt. We did, with the tools and the processes that was available, everybody did the best that they could. That involved, long hours. It involved working in the evenings. It involved working on the weekends, and there was sacrifice, obviously, that people all had to put in. But everyone did what they could as part of that. And the changes were simply unprecedented. It's not something that that was scheduled, right? It's not like you've got the typical luxuries around, handling with change management processes and so on. And everybody was impacted differently, and we've all had to change suddenly. So one of the things with this is you couldn't plan ahead and control when you're going to do this. We had to move our employees remote to now working remote immediately. As in, we had to make this happen right now, not next week or a month later. It had to be done very fast. There's a lot of challenges that came with that. These are all unprecedented events. It wasn't planned. There was no change management control process where we've got the 50 steps of the implementation, execution, all the tasks are going to be taken with a well-documented and thought-out back-out processes and how to handle this. There was none of that, right? These were unplanned events, and the thing with this is that there was heavy amounts of IT intervention to actually make this happen, and it was a lot of that results in things like a lot of potential for human error, right? Also things like potential for inconsistency with the different ways that different people, when they're executing these events, the different ways that they can take them, right? And the thing with this is a lot of people are actually just figuring it out as they progress through it. If I take an example of enabling remote work, first the IT staff had to make themselves remote, and then they had to enable the rest of the business users to also become remote. So it was a lot of figuring things out as they progressed through it, just to make it happen really quickly. And also some level of risk, right? Depending on the way that was done and how it actually happens, there will be some level of risk, whether it's excessive access rights, or it might be some steps in the process that went unchecked, some additional controls that just could have been implemented, but we didn't have the luxuries of time to be able to do that. Found a meme online actually, just going through last night, and I thought, it's a very good way to just sum up 2020. Started 2020 being well prepared. We've got all our cybersecurity tools and everything in place, and then we found that small little gap right through the helmet. So I thought I'd share that. So I'm just going to talk about a fictitious company over here. So let's just say this organization. There are about 10,000 employees distributed across 4 different locations, a global organization. Active Directory is obviously a very key system for them. And they use that for their primary authentication. They're also using Office 365 services and obviously everything, or Microsoft services, and all the other service and capability that comes with that, right? So right now in this sample company, approximately 10% of their employees are remote, or they're designated as a remote employee within the HR system. That means that they get access through the VPN. They have authorized through VPN access, and that's typically controlled through, let's say, an AD group, right? So they've got a group within AD called VPN users, for example. And then it happens, and then the change has happened. There's an abrupt change to our business processes. From 10%, we now have to jump into 100% of our employees now forced to become remote, right? So it's actually, what do you do? How do you handle that? There is a massive a sudden change. That sudden change actually caused a lot of IT intervention, a lot of IT effort to be involved to be able to actually handle those changes. And what we mean by the key words here is actually being able to enable that. Enable the 90% of users that we've now had to take from our offices and move them to be able to work from home, right? And able to then become remote employees. That might involve setting them up with VPN access. It might actually, in some cases, for many organizations, it involved the purchase of new additional hardware. So purchase of laptops, for example. Some users, some employees, typically who use desktop PCs, are now trying to transition to laptops. So moving data across, moving applications across, provisioning VPN access, provisioning multi-factor authentication, whatever else that was needed for these 90%. That's 9,000 employees that we just had to do really fast. That's just on the remote side. And then, like I was saying, then there's the transfers cross departments, cross agencies, or cross business functions and business areas to support volumes or support the increase in volumes in different service areas. So then it's just also provisioning at the application and the data layer to be able to give access to different sets of data or different applications to be able to support the other area. So there is a lot of processes, a lot of provisioning type processes that have had to be done through here. And a lot of it was done manually, in some organizations where, even for the applications that rely on Active Directory, is just be able to control those, right? It also involved, as part of that, being able to identify who now needs to be remote. So it wasn't just a manual effort on the IT side, but even on the HR side as well. It's now designated all employees to effectively become remote employees as well. Locate the account, and obviously locate the account, perform the change with an AD, add them into the group, so whatever it is, and then repeat the process again for each one of these. So there's been a lot of changes. Every account that had to be, every account that changes had to be touched. So there was a very high touch activity. The consequence of all of this, with what we've gone through, is that a lot of this was rushed, right? Like time and change management processes, and be able to test these and schedule them and have all your backup plans and everything like that implemented well in advance. It was a sudden, abrupt change, and it had to be rushed. We had to move employees really quickly. What that means, what that opens there, is a potential for things with errors, with inconsistency. Maybe even skip a couple of steps in the process so it can happen faster, right? So we can get it done. The other thing is, apart from just being rushed, the people who have been supporting the organization do this have already been working long hours. So it's that needs to be added on top. Plus, when we think about errors that could have occurred, those errors can lead into potential risk as well. Briefly, when we're talking about earlier with being able to control the access to the user and that whole provisioning process, and like the typical cloning process, that opens up a potential risk factor. So if somebody's credential was stolen through there, that person might have access that they didn't need, or they shouldn't have had access to. Right? All that will come back, with productivity loss as well, right? So the longer this took for organizations, there was a loss in productivity and delays, and that resulted in wasted money as well. And when things do go back to some kind of normal, and they will, whatever the new normal will be, right? And when what I mean by that is, some element of remote working might become part of the new normal, where some employees might prefer for that, 2 days a week from home, 3 days from the office type of arrangement, or different type of arrangements depending on your organization and how it works for you guys. But there will be another change to the business processes. And as part of that, another change back onto the IT systems and back into the applications and those back-end systems and applications that support the business processes. All right. So it's about how do you handle that again? And what will you do then? Right. And there is no Control-Z button for this. There is no undo button to be able to just revert back any changes that were implemented, or any quick fixes or band-aids or workarounds or whatever it was that had to be implemented for that. It's going to be another manual effort. It's going to be another effort of going through and identifying who will need to change, HR will have to be involved, identify who needs to be changed, what needs to be changed on the account, and then actually executing those steps. Whether it might be remove VPN access, remove group memberships, or add in additional group memberships. A lot of this stuff is going to go unchecked as part of this process as well as we start going through this, right? And we're going back into the same consequences. We're going back through the long hours, the rushed work, the inconsistencies, and the potential for other risks caused by the simple human error. Right? So what I want to get to is actually, what if there was something that we can have that could have actually automated all of that for us? And what I mean by that is the ability to actually automate the provisioning and deprovisioning of that access. So I want everybody to have VPN go, right? Or be able to group the different types of employees together and say, well, these guys, these employees now, these 50 or 100 employees are now going to support our call center or are now going to support a different function. Assign them those application rights and then let them go out and do that, right? And then quickly identify when you have to bring it back, bring it back again from a single interface, from a single console. Not just around automating that, but also around doing the bulk provisioning type of stuff. So being able to, onboard a large amount of contractors or contingent workers or, external resources or inter-department resources quickly, load them up really quickly, and then deprovision them or offboard them just as fast as you've done that. What if you could actually simulate all that? So before you executed the change, before you actually add 5,000 people into a group in AD, what if you could run a test? What would be the impact, right? Before you add all these additional roles or removed roles from people, what if you could actually simulate that and go, well, this is what we want to do, run it through the simulation, and that just produced the end result, and that tested that for you, gave you some validation around what the end action will be. And then from there, then you could go and schedule that and go, well, okay, we're happy with that result. We want that to occur at Friday at 5 p.m. Schedule it and let that go and deploy the change for you. The results of this would be getting to a point where you've actually got a system that will be able to handle this virtually instantly, pretty quickly for you, with minimal IT intervention, a lot of minimizing the amount of actual manual effort and manual work and rework that needs to happen, removing the element of an inconsistency, because now everything will become consistent as it's all controlled through a single point, right? It can help save money because now the provisioning is actually happening a lot faster and deprovisioning is happening just as quick as well. It happens precisely and correctly, but ultimately it's going to eliminate the risk. We'll remove a lot of that risk with excessive access. Everything will be controlled and checked and balanced through all the processes and workflows and so on. So with that, I want to invite you to go and actually explore for yourself. Have a look at our site. We've got some information around that on what we can offer and how we can actually automate these type of processes.
Great, thank you for the presentations. I'll leave the screen up a little bit longer so attendee can copy and paste that link and they can go into it. Thank you for that presentation, Serkan. Ladies and gentlemen, if you can actually complete a poll for me, that would be great. That would be appreciated. Now, Serkan, yesterday we had this conversation about gig economy. And just now, I just relook at your presentation again. It actually got me thinking that before this crisis or disruption, a lot of companies are going through what they call urbanization strategy, or at least they wanted to do that. Meaning that how to create a firm that only attract the highest talent on a project basis. And deliver and borderless organization, kind of thing. And when this pandemic or disruption happened as such, the idea of urbanization or gig economy are a lot more enticing for organizations that want to stay agile, meaning that they could post a project and allow anyone that with that kind of skill, credential to apply for it and complete that project and move on to another. This actually also allows organizations to be able to change very quickly if situation do get out of hand. As we can see right now, not just this pandemic, the trade war and what happened in the US, etc., and that sort of thing, there's always changes. I mean, the IAM solutions come into play when they look at, urbanization, gig economy, and agile environment.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Actually, there's, and I was just going to say that this is all about agility. This is all about businesses actually becoming more agile, becoming more flexible with the way that they approach business processes and the services that they offer. And to be competitive in today's market, you do need to be agile. Every organization needs to become a little bit more agile with the way that with the services that they offer, with what they do, right? It's a very fast moving world. And what that all comes back to is actually making sure that you've got the right identity systems and processes that can help support your business in becoming agile. And what we mean by that is, traditionally, a lot of people will implement a process, an identity method or a process with the requirements that you have today. But the reality is today will not be valid in 6 months' time, because in 6 months' time, your business will have changed. You may be offering a new service or offering a new capability, or you may remove a service from what you offer to your customers. So you need a identity system that can actually support that support those changes for your business. And that's what we mean by where identity management actually has a very big, important role in being able to help organizations get with business agility, right? Being able to create those new access rights, onboard new applications very fast, very rapidly, provision access within minutes, deprovision again within minutes when it's no longer required, but also be able to group them in different ways and then provide that capability, that control back to the owner, back to the line of business manager, to the business owner, who can now define what they need instead of having to raise a help desk ticket and open up another 6-month-long project or a 12-month-long project to handle that.
Okay. I think this disruption is going away anytime soon. The reason I say that is because I'm based in Hong Kong, and the last couple of weeks or 3 weeks ahead or even month, we have actually no local transmission cases up until 2 or 3 days ago. Suddenly there is, because 3 or 4 weeks ago, since that we don't have any cases, a lot of group gatherings and government has started to relax the rules and that sort of thing. And now we see a little spike of cases that actually locally transmitted and such. And this also happened in Canada, I think in Montreal, and some other places as where they believe that, okay, well, since that we're able to control it, I think we should relax the rule, allow people to go back to work, kids go back to school, etc. And they're now worried about the second or third or fourth wave of disruptions or anything like that. And what can cybersecurity people do when it comes to make sure that continue to be part of their BCP plan and or allow organization to change very quickly, per se? Because, for example, let's just say I believe that a number of people in Singapore are allowed to go back to the office to work. And I think kids are starting to go back to school. So what does it mean for organization to revamp their cybersecurity plan? And if that's to say the disruption do happen again, what can they do?
Yeah, actually, you're spot on. When I follow some of this article quite closely as well, and a lot of government officials will talk about the second wave, and they don't want that second wave, right? But we shouldn't be thinking that it won't come. We need to be prepared. We need to be better prepared for the worst case. And what I mean by that is, if that second wave does come, and we now do allow some of our employees to go back to the offices, we need to make sure we can bring them back to their homes just as fast as we allow them to go back in. It all just ties in with what we're just talking about with being agile and making sure that your IT process, your cybersecurity, your identity processes allow for that agility where you can provision and deprovision it just as fast. Maybe you even want to actually make some of this stuff self-service, right? And why shouldn't it be? When you think about it, why don't you allow the user to be able to request, hey, I want to now work from home, right? Provision me VPN access and have that complete process end-to-end automated, where the action is now initiated by the end user, automatically provisioned by the system with an email, and it goes, you've now got VPN access. This is how you do it. Right? So no intervention required at all. So
Okay.
yeah, that's something the organization would consider.
We do. I mean, since March, we ran almost about 100 webinars by now. Number of our attendees was telling us that they actually do more work at home than they did in an organization. Because obviously, if you went back to the office, you can chit chat with your friends, the coffee break, cigarette break, whatever. At home, there's no break. It's just basically work, work, work all the way through. It was struggling for the first 2 weeks, but right now a lot of people get used to it. And could this be the way of life? Where they can actually balance work-life balance with their family and work. Now, if they do deploy one identity solution, how would organization measure the return of investment of an automated solution versus manual approach for provisioning and deprovisioning?
That's a good question. And the way that I would actually approach that, if I was going to look at a return investment on this, first I need to look at, well, what does it actually cost my business today? All right, and what I mean by that is not just, there's the IT cost, obviously, so let's just leave the IT cost for a second. But before we get to that, we need to actually look at the HR side of it as well, right? So which is really non-IT, some of the business process side of it, with making that person, for example, as a remote employee, setting them up or designated them as being a remote employee now. And that might take a couple of minutes, whatever that takes to go on. So that's one part of it. Then the next part is the effort that's required for the IT side, for the IT and cybersecurity side. And what I mean by that effort is it might have to go and provision a new user account. It might have to add users into a group. It may be actually provision accounts in more than one system, in multiple systems, right? Might be AD, might be your LDAP, your database, your mainframe, whatever. There's going to be a whole bunch of these depending on what you're asking, depending on what needs to be done. Each one of those will have some time that it takes, whether it's 5 minutes, whether it's 10 minutes. On a study that we did, we found that on average, if it was to go completely end to end, and we're going to go from start to end, it takes about 57 minutes, right? And now, depending on how much the hourly rate is for a HR and a IT person, you can now easily measure the cost of that, right? The other thing with that cost is it's not just a once-off. It's once for every action for each employee, right? And every time you've got one of these, let's say you've just brought in a new SaaS application, or you brought in some new application, whatever it is, and you've got 500 employees that need to get access to that application, then it's 57 minutes times 500, right? For each time that you need to go and do this. So I would look at that first, and then from the automation side, actually look at that over 3 years. So when you're implementing any kind of identity administration, automation type technology, there is obviously the initial implementation effort, right? There will be an initial project cost and the project effort. And so I'm not, discounting any of that. But then when you look at it over 3 years, you'll see that the return investment over 3 years, you will definitely see that return over the 3-year period. And that's the better way to look at it when you look at it over a longer term.
Okay, I get it. So they don't necessarily need to spend any more money on manpower. Not like they have any more manpower to spend. And that's what we meant by the agile environment, urbanization. You can use tools to do it. I believe something with me about an ROI calculator. If you could share here with our attendee, that would be great. We have one question or two questions coming in just now. Let's just answer. Okay, there's no name here. If I want to allow my call center back office team member who exposed to sensitive system and data work from home, what are the considerations? That's question number one. Let's just answer this first before I go to the second one.
Okay, so there's a couple of different things that you need to be considering through there, right? One of them is, how do you physically enable that? When you say back office worker, are they working desktop, PC, laptop, all that kind of stuff, right? So how do you actually physically get them from the office to their house? That's one of them. Then you need to make sure that they're logging in securely. and you might have an existing VPN kind of process that's already in place. So using your VPN, you might want to add some additional security around that with multi-factor as well. So that's something that needs to be considered. Now, depending on some of the applications how can I make this as easy as possible for my office worker, for my back office worker? And what I mean by that is actually getting to a more of a frictionless approach. So depending on how you're implementing your security, you might want to look at implementing some additional tools around that will provide that remote access into those applications without actually adding any additional steps on top. So to make it more seamless and more transparent. So from the end user's perspective, they just continue working as if they were sitting back in the office, right? Back on level 3 or level 7, whichever level they're in, back at their desk. It looks and feels exactly the same, but now they're just doing that from home. So that's some of the stuff that you'd have to look at. So security in the experience and usability, of course.
Question number 2, I think you already kind of answered that just now. Could you please elaborate existing enterprise IAM solution versus your offering and how it differs?
Yeah. So when we talk about like a identity strategy and solution there are a couple of different elements that play into this. We talked briefly about Active Directory being a very important piece of that, and that handles a lot of the authentication and authorization side for some applications. But when we talk about identity management as well, then you also need to consider around the identity actual lifecycle, the provisioning and deprovisioning technology, and the identity governance technology. So one of the things that we do offer is the ability to automate using Identity Manager, automate that and apply governance over the top of that as well. And by governance, what I mean is actually being able to apply the controls to do things like detecting toxic combinations, for example. You shouldn't assign this application plus this other application at the same time to the one user. So that might be a potential violation, or give them excessive access rights. So they're the kind of tools they're the kind of processes and technologies that will go into play as part of an identity-centric strategy.
Okay. It's just say, how does it help me with remote work? I think you also answered that just now. Let's just go to, is there a list of third-party tech stack to be supported along with your solutions?
Sorry, is there a list of third-party
tech stack to be supported along with your solution? Example, VPN, 2FA, enterprise firewall.
Yeah, actually, the way that we've got a long list of the out-of-the-box integrations and everything like that, obviously, right? And you have to have these integrations. There's heavy integration involved in these. So we've got a list of the integrations that are out there, and we can share that information with you guys as well. But the other approach that we've taken is to take an open approach. And what I mean by that is not just look at it from an application and for each application or for each system, but actually taking industry standards-based approaches and being able to support things like protocols and like common protocols such as LDAP, for example, or Radius, even SCIM. So using industry standards like that and using APIs that are open, that actually simplifies that integration and allows for us to be able to integrate with any system that opens some kind of an API. And for that system to also integrate with the identity platform, because it's actually going to be two ways, right? People always think about it as one way, but then there's always a use case where your application might need something from the identity system. So that's the approach that we've taken to make it really open, to make it flexible, to allow that to happen.
Okay. Well, I hope we answer your questions. The second person asked question is that if an organization based in 14 countries with 10 AD, how does one identity solution help in IDM process?
Yeah.
I think this is actually coming to bite me with my AD questions for you. And in a scenario where these users in 14 countries are on 10 of its 365 tenants, how does it help in consolidate all employee MSFT team or YAML?
Yeah.
Are you trying to punish me or punish? Anyway, go ahead.
Okay, that's a really good question. Actually, that reminded me of an organization that I worked in that we helped out a few years back, actually. The project was a couple of years ago now, where they had 16 different AD domains. So I know somebody who has more than you, but they're all in one country, by the way. So you've got 14 different countries, I suppose. Now, you're right. So in that case, you do have multiple domains and you do have multiple countries. So there are a lot of different things you need to be considering as part of that, as part of that type of the geographic spread that you have with the different countries, plus the different AD domains that you have. What you need is a solution that can actually support that by integrating to each one of those. Because although you have different AD domains, you haven't specified if they're all part of the same forest, if you have domain trusts in place, and regardless, they might be in the same forest, you have domain trusts, your Office 365 tenants may or may not be connected to each other. You may or may not have federation between the two. So if we just treat them as all being independent, a centralized identity platform should be able to integrate to any one of those, to all of those, right? And control the provisioning and the management of all of those from a single central point. So what that means is any one of your employees that we control through there, we can say that this employee needs an account within domain A and domain B and provision both those accounts. And this employee needs to be registered within O365 tenant A, and they need to have a contact created in tenant B, C, D, and E, whatever it is, right? Whatever the process is, or however you've got that currently set up. So there's going to be some things that we'll need to look at as part of that. And so I think it's probably, it's a long, in-depth conversation that we'll probably need to have after the call. I'm more than happy to have that with you.
Sure.
The person who asked that. So yeah, there are ways that we can help.
We did basically promise all the participants this session is only going to be 45, 50 minutes and maybe draw to an hour. We do have a couple of minutes left, but I also like to thank you, Serkan, for your great presentations and things that I throw at you, in particular the AD and also I also noticed that I believe the news is now saying that you guys want to just move database security with Microsoft SQL. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's right. Actually, I forgot to mention that. Thank you. So yeah, we did, and what we're doing there is we're taking a frictionless approach to actually boosting the security capabilities around that. And what I mean by frictionless approach in that space is what we currently do today, and what we have always offered, is the ability to actually control and secure your operating system platforms without having to install any specialized agents on the target endpoint, like on the Windows or Linux servers, or any specialized desktop OS on the end user side. And that's what we mean by frictionless. There's no changes to what the user currently has to do today, or very minimal, right? They can continue using the exact same tools that they're using. Taking that exact same approach, the exact same mentality, we want the database administrator, whoever your SQL Server administrator is, we want them to use the tools that they're using right now, whether it's Microsoft SQL Server Studio, tools that come from with Microsoft. You might be using Quest Toad, for example, right? Our Toad offerings as part of the Quest software to manage the SQL Server environment. This capability allows you to use any of those tools, any of those existing processes that you have, and still secure your SQL environment, so we can see and track and monitor the data that's been accessed from the database, what's been done, what actions are being executed. Bring it all and correlate all that back with all the other intelligence that we're capturing as part of that to look for things that are like anomalies.
That's auditing, no?
Correct, and detective at the same time. So it's actually a really interesting technology, and yeah.
Okay. I'd like to basically talk more about that technology. I don't want to take more of our attendee time because they actually may have other things that they need to do. But thank you so much for your time, and also I hope that this particular webinar did provide insight and some takeaway for you. Second, if you can actually drop your email address here. They can actually reach out to you individually if they want to ask more questions about how to audit, how to make sure that how to track data access, etc., and that sort of thing for further. Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You've been great. If you can give a warm applause to myself and to Serkan, that would be excellent. Like I said, I don't want to just be talking on screen itself. Again, thank you, Serkan. I speak to you soon. Bye. Bye-bye.